The United States and Iran have begun indirect talks in Geneva over their long nuclear dispute, with a senior Iranian official asserting that negotiations hinge on Washington avoiding unrealistic demands. United States envoys Steve Witkoff and Kushner will take part in the negotiations, which are being mediated by Oman alongside Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas. Araqchi. US President Donald Trump earlier said he would be involved indirectly in the Geneva talks. For a look at what this means, we are joined by international relations expert Professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Tapiso, and thanks for the opportunity.
So what do we understand? What is the US president communicating by saying that he is involved in the talks indirectly, given that it's a high-stakes game?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very tense days ahead for the Middle East, but I think for the international community more broadly, because if talks fail, and America decides to attack Iran again to eliminate its nuclear capacity, it will affect the region and then the rest of us. So what Trump is saying is that he's got envoys, Witkoff and Kushner, his son-in-law. I don't know why he's chosen that young man to talk about these things, but he's got envoys who's got his ear and his support, who represents America's interests in the rounds of talks, which are not going very well, unfortunately.
And what do you see as the stumbling blocks? As we mentioned, the call is for the US not to have unrealistic demands. And obviously that depends from which prism you sit. So what is your understanding of that? And what would be the guiding principles that Iran and the US would have to agree upon for the second round of talks?
Yeah, it looks to me as if this is an intractable, an unsolvable puzzle, because Iran wants to maintain its power and influence in its own region. It's an undisputed regional leader. It is powerful. It has influence in the Middle East, and it is busy preparing a nuclear capacity, which it says is for peaceful use. It's not difficult to convert nuclear capacity for peaceful use into weapons. It's not a big step to take. And so it insists on its sovereignty and its own legitimacy in the region where it feels most comfortable. Now, this is a direct threat to America, whose biggest ally is Israel, also in the Middle East. And Israel, by the way, has nuclear weapons, undeclared, but we know that they do, with American support. So the Americans view Iran as a threat and as an enemy to be neutralized or to be removed. In fact, America is very active in the Middle East, trying to remove the Ayatollahs from power in Iran. It is busy with all manners of mis- and disinformation campaigns. And has bombed Iran in last June to try and neutralize its nuclear capacity. So what the Americans want is a neutral or a neutralized or a regime-changed Iran, a new government in Iran that is US friendly and Israel friendly, and it's preparing its military muscle to take that step if necessary, if the talks fail. Iran, on the other hand, says, you've got no business changing my government or our government or interfering in the Middle East and controlling the agenda here. I have a role to play here myself. I've got friends and allies, and I work together with many others. So it's a standoff, really. The principle, perhaps, that both ought to agree on, and the international community, is that nations have a sovereign right to defend themselves against aggression. And number two, to develop nuclear capacity for peaceful use, as we do in South Africa, by the way, after we got rid of our own nuclear weapons. If that is the basis upon which an agreement can be struck, and by the way, remember, if I can quickly add, Tsepiso, In 2015, there was another round of conversations and a deal was struck, an agreement for Iran to pursue nuclear capacity, but the peaceful use of, and the Americans agreed, and the international community agreed, and the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Board, agreed to supervise the implementation of this agreement. In 2018, in Trump's first term, he walked away, the American administration walked away from this agreement and said, we don't trust the Iranians. We don't want to be held hostage to an agreement that the Democrats signed up to, and we will renegotiate this entire thing. And this is where we are now. The real danger with a failure of talks and an inability to reach some kind of a compromise or agreement is that it opens the door for violent conflict for America, which is really a very mighty and powerful military force, to force change in Iran and unleash violence. And of course, the Iranians will not sit back and take that without fighting back. So it itself is preparing for a war.
And the Iranians have been somewhat agitated by what it sees as the lack of trustworthiness of the US president, in particular Donald Trump, and has rejected the zero enrichment demand made on it. But there are those who are asking questions about, with the temporary closure of the Strait of Hormuz and Iran conducting military drills, what strategy then would the US employ to ensure that it really avoids regional conflict or all-out, insecurity?
Yeah, no, you ask a very difficult question. The only way, so of course Iran can strike back, it can close the Strait of Hormuz, it can cause an economic catastrophe for the entire international community. But I think the calculation of the hardliners in Washington and in Tel Aviv is that a preemptive strike to disable the Iranian missile program or capacity to hit back at Israel, the Strait of Hormuz, to blow up, ships in the Gulf and so on, is on the table. It's an option that the Trump administration is considering. I don't think the Trump administration are together on what to do next. Many in the Trump administration says, let's not spend our time and energy forcing change in Iran and in the Middle East. We've got better things to do back home. It's the same message they gave to the Europeans. We're not really interested in continuing with the war in Ukraine and Russia. We've got better things to do. And and then there are other hardliners who say, we have to wipe out Iran. And that pressure comes from the Netanyahu regime in Tel Aviv, in Israel. So the scales are balanced between those who say, strike preemptively and remove the threat in Iran. Others who say, no. There's a careful balance of power in the Middle East. Let's not overextend or bomb Iran again, because the consequences might be unimaginable or unpredictable or catastrophic for the global economy.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really appreciate it. Wish we had more time, but I'm sure we will keep up the conversation with you as it develops. Professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk, who is an international relations expert, speaking to us about the latest round of US-Iran talks.